adventurers! 'Tis I, Nathaniel Gomezian, shopkeeper and proprietor of Gaming Treasure Chest, and in today's video we're going to be going through 3 different puzzles which are all to do with the theme of sacrifice. Let's get into this. Yes, that's right. All of today's puzzles are to do with the theme of sacrifice. I like the idea of having a theme for puzzles, so if people have got ideas of themes they want puzzles to be themed around, please leave them in the comment section down below and I might do a poll or something and we'll find out and slowly but surely make funny puzzles that all of us enjoy and want to get more involved with. So, without further ado, let's get into the first of the sacrifice puzzles. So the first puzzle is more of a role-play kind of puzzle, and it's all to do with the idea of sacrifice of knowledge. Your players having to potentially sacrifice part of their backstory or something that they potentially want to keep hidden from the other players. Now, I said this is potentially because we'll get into how this puzzle works. So the setup for this one is your players walk into a room. As they look around this room, there are statues of knights, like a couple of knights, like on each side of the wall. There is a door across the way, but the door seems to be locked and they can't seem to get past it. And in the middle of the room, there is a circle, like a slight circle that is raised up from the rest of the floor, and in front of that is another knight who's standing there holding a sword looking at the circle, looking like a kind of eye level if somebody was standing on that circle. Now the idea of it is that the knight looks a bit more fancier than the other statues which are around. It doesn't have to be a knight as well. If you're in, say, a holy temple of some kind of god, it can be the god who's in the middle with these knights that are surrounding him on the walls. But basically the middle statue is a bit different from all the other statues. And if they walk up to the circle that's in the middle of the room, just where the knight is, they will read the word confess that's written on that circle in the middle of the room. Now you can have somewhere in the room, maybe on a plaque or even on the circle itself, which has the word confess written on it, the words, "Some truths weigh heavy on the mind and soul. Confess and pass." So after reading that, your players basically have to stand on the circle which says confess, looking at the knight or a god or whatever statue you have in the middle, and confess something that's deeply troubling to their character because it's basically weighing them down. And if they are telling the truth and you believe it's deemed worthy enough, because it can't just be some mundane truth like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something stupid that they could confess to that is not really weighty on the soul. It has to be something which, that they would have wanted to try to keep hidden, not something that they would just tell anyone. So you can deem what you think about that, and also whether or not it's true. Now what you do here is really up to you, but the idea is that obviously you want something that's truthful from your players, but your players might also try to lie and deceive. But it depends on whether or not you want the other members of the party to know if they're lying or telling the truth, or if you want to keep it secret. Obviously, if you want your players to know, then you could just ask them straight up, is this the truth or is this a lie? And basically, if it's a lie, then they have to pass a deception roll of a 20 DC, otherwise the statue in the middle comes to life, so do the statues on the side, and combat commences. And obviously once combat finishes, then the doorway opens for everyone. So there is also another way of getting around this. Your players don't have to tell the truth, but if they do tell the truth and they say, yep, I want everyone to know that I'm telling the truth, and they all get past it, then obviously what happens is that the doorway opens. Like you could say that the statue in the middle moves and gestures towards the door, and the doorway opens, and therefore they can all make their way through. But if you want to make it so that your players don't know who's telling the truth and who's not telling the truth, then what you can do is you can have 2 bits of paper, which basically one says truth, one says lie, and after your player says whatever they want to say as their revealing piece of information, they can pass you one of the notes and you can read it. Now, whatever it is, whether or not it is truth or whether or not it is lie, get your players to roll and tell you what number they get, because this way the other players don't actually know whether or not they were telling the truth or whether or not they were telling a lie. If they're telling the truth, it doesn't matter what they roll, but if they're telling a lie, obviously they have to beat that DC 20, otherwise the things come to life. And obviously at that point the other players can probably guess that was a lie, but depending on what obviously people roll, they might never know whether or not people are telling the truth or lie. And basically, it can make it so that people don't know, and they might start to ask questions. And it's all about your characters getting to know each other, and whether or not your players decide to reveal whether or not something was false or not is up to them. One thing I would say with this is a really good idea to let your players know in advance, like maybe like, you know, tell them something along the lines of, I want you to start thinking of things that your character might have done in the past that they're not too proud of, or something along those lines, so that it doesn't just catch your players off guard. They've got to quickly try and think of something off the top of their head that they could confess to. So that's just something that I would say is a good idea, is to like give some building blocks leading up to this. Don't just throw them in here, because obviously that can cause your players potentially some kind of stress if they don't know, oh no, what am I going to say that's like something that's actually truthful and works for my player. So give them the opportunity. So before I said, know that you're going to do this puzzle and give them some advanced warning. It doesn't have to be directly before, it could be quite a bit before, but it's just so that they know something and they're prepared for the question of potentially telling the truth to something that their character is not too proud of. But that's just a fun little puzzle that involves the sacrifice of knowledge. So the second puzzle is to do with the sacrifice of health. And so we're going to call this Blood Bowl, because it just makes sense when you hear what's going on here. So, to set the scene, your players walk into, it can be either inside or outside, depending on what's going on in your campaign or where you want to put this puzzle, and they walk into this area which has some kind of door yet again, which they cannot get their way through, and in the middle is a bowl, like a big huge bowl that is connected to, at the bottom, like a bunch of runes or engravings or whatever it is that you want this bowl to be resting on top of. Now, if your players decide to examine the bowl, they will see that either written on the outside or inside, depending on what you want, something along the lines of, "Fill me with the liquid of life." Basically, meaning blood. And so the idea here is that if your players try to fill this bowl with anything other than blood, it will just magically vanish, or it will be shot out of the bowl, basically. So you can do it so if they decide to try and put water in the bowl, it can shoot out at them and do a little tiny bit of damage if you want it to, or it could just be a big shock and splash in the face. Obviously, you don't have to go crazy. Some people decide to go crazy with damage, but you don't have to. Because let's face it, they're already going to be taking damage when they start putting some blood into the bowl, because the idea here is that obviously the players are to put their own blood into the bowl, whether or not it's just one player or whether or not the players will take it in turns to put some blood into the bowl. Basically, it would be a certain number of hit points. Now, obviously, this will depend on the players' levels, because you don't want to have it being 40 hit points when they're level 1, because it'll just kill all of them instantly. But obviously, you don't want it to be something mundane, 10 hit points if they are vastly over leveled. So you'll have to decide on what you think is a fair amount in order to basically make it so that the players will notice this loss of blood. Obviously, they might have healing potions, they might have healers, so they might just be able to completely negate this entirely, but it is still a sacrifice that the players are going to have to make, and it's going to be spell slots or healing potions that they're going to be sacrificing along the way. Here's another thing though. With this puzzle, because this puzzle was actually given to me by my DM, who put it in front of us as players, we actually got round this puzzle by, it was on the outside, and we had just killed an owlbear not too far away, and so we kind of brought the corpse of the owlbear with us and filled it with the blood of the owlbear, which does still work, as long as it's blood, it's fine, and once it fills up, basically, the blood then filters down and goes through the etches or whatever it is you have underneath, and it then opens the door. It can also do something else if that's what you want it to do. If you don't want it to simply open a door, it could also be that maybe as the blood filters down into these etching and engravings, that the ground comes to life and maybe a staircase goes, rather than there just being an obvious doorway. So you don't have to do a doorway, it's just the way that you can do it, that just makes sense for me when I'm explaining things. But as I said, these are just concepts, you don't have to use them exactly as I say, you can invent whichever ways you want. So potentially the staircase that goes downwards, which is quite an interesting way of using it. Now, if you're one of those DMs who likes to zhuzh things up by actually having something physical on the table, then you can have something along these lines where you can use a Pythagoras cup. But Gomez, I thought that Pythagoras was just somebody who loved triangles. Well, yes, he loved triangles, but he was a mathematician who did other things as well. So anyway, he made this cup, which is all to do with siphoning. So it's got a secret, this is actually known as a devilish or devish, whatever way you want to say it, Pythagoras cup, where you can't see how it happens because it kind of happens within the side. There's a siphon effect which then makes the liquid go down. So if you want to make it look more visually stunning, you can do something like this where they're filling the cup with like a red dyed water. Then when it gets to a certain point, the idea of a greedy cup or Pythagoras cup, if you don't know, is that once it gets to a certain point, it then drains out the bottom. I can go into it more in detail if somebody wants, but that's not the purpose of this video. And drains down into this thing down below, which then is like a nice little visual thing. Now what you can do if you want, you can have a measuring cylinder that you can put the water that's coloured red into, and you can have on their markers, which lets them know how much HP they're actually donating to the bowl, if you want to add that as a thing as well, so they can actually kind of see their health that they are giving towards this puzzle. If people want that and if you're a DM who likes having that. Now I will say, I will link down below the free, because the Pythagoras cup is actually free on Cults, and also I will be linking the my design, because the bit that goes onto the bottom of the cup where it feeds down into is actually something which I designed. I'll be linking that free as well on Cult's thing down below for people who have got a 3D printer and want to add that little extra pizzazz. You don't have to though, these are just your options. So that is the second puzzle that's all to do with, as I said, the sacrifice of blood and health. So the third and final puzzle of this video is the sacrifice of life itself. And so the idea of this puzzle, because I wanted to come up with a puzzle which really does kind of like challenge the player's mortality. So this can be done in several different ways, but I will explain to you the way that I'm thinking about it in my head. So your players walk into this room, and in there is a stone pillar which has got a sword sticking into it. They can't get through the door, as I said yet again, that leads out of this place, but what they find are paintings or engravings on the walls of this room that they're currently in. So one of them has got the plinth in the middle with a knight standing next to it. The next one has got the knight laying down on the altar with the sword raised, and another painting has got the knight on the altar, but like a kind of like laying down with one hand connected to the sword, which he has plunged through his stomach, with the last picture or engraving showing an open door. So through those paintings or engravings, your players basically know, oh crap, in order to proceed, one of us has to plunge this sword through our chest while being on the altar, which obviously means there's the potential of death, which, let's face it, most players want to avoid. You can also have something that's maybe on the altar itself, which says something like only life given willingly, or something like that, which basically is just to stop them from being able to grab, say, a goblin or something that's thrown around and try to place them and hold them in some kind of weird torturous way as one of them plunges the sword through. If they try to do that, the door won't open. Life must be given willingly, and so that would not count as such. Your players might decide to do an investigation or arcana check, and if they do that, they will find that there are runes on the sword, and there are also runes within the placement. So basically if they take the sword out of the altar, like it's kind of like gone in a little bit, they'll find also engravings and runes within the inner bit of it. Because basically, this might sound like a dick move, but this is a ruse. Because basically, if a character lays on the altar and raises the sword above them and stabs themselves through, going above where that etched hole is already there, the magical runes of the sword, if the participant is willing and stabbing down on themselves, will actually allow the blade to pass through the willing victim and go into the hole, and that will open the door. Now this is one way you can do it. You can also do it that it does actually kill the player, and you can have it that they can stand up from their body and that their ghostly self can travel through the door, and upon travelling through the door they are able to interact with something like a button, a lever, whichever you want, that opens the door, and upon them doing that, the door opens and they are then whooshed, shooshed back into their body, if you want to add that extra tension of them actually thinking that they are potentially dead. So it's a kind of, if you like, but it will obviously create quite a bit of tension, and obviously people don't want to lose their life and that. So I just think it's quite an interesting puzzle that can play on the role play aspects of some things, because like, will there be somebody who'll be willing to step forward and do, would it take one for the team for them to be able to move forward? I would say put this into a place whereby there's actually something that they know is going to be of great reward on the other side getting through the door, like maybe there's a relic or something like some kind of item or that they have to get to because they need it in order to help with whatever the big bad is or whatnot. Or if you want to do this with something to do with, like, this is how they can access the big bad, I don't know. Whoever you want, I just think that that's something that's like, it's got to be more compelling for them to want to do this. Because if it's just a random cave, then they just be like, screw this, we're leaving. Let's get this isn't good enough for me to risk my life for. Good day! So something along those lines. But I said that's just the idea. As I said, it is quite a hardcore one, the idea of your players potentially losing their lives. As I said, just an idea, and you can play with it however you want. If you want your players to actually legitimately sacrifice their lives to move forward, that's up to you. I'm not one for that, so as I said, so there is actually a secret to the puzzle that your players can, if they investigate enough, can find out that this is magical and that it won't actually kill them, or, as I said, that their spirit can then go through, open a door and then come back to their body. I said, like, whichever way you want to do it, it's up to you. So I hope you enjoyed today's video on 3 puzzles which are involving the theme of sacrifice. If you've got any ideas, as I said at the beginning, of different kind of themes that you want puzzles to be themed around, I'd love to hear them, because I love creating puzzles. So I'd love to hear your ideas down below. So potentially we'll do a poll and make this whole thing a community kind of thing, that like we all come together to make these things happen. So if you want to leave a comment down below on a suggestion of a theme, please do. And I said then we'll make a kind of poll or something. Or speaking of community, if you want to join the Discord, the link is down below, so don't feel forced. And if you enjoyed yourself so far and want to see more content like this, then why not consider hitting the subscribe button, because, you know, it will help out this little man and potentially let him live his dreams, and hit that bell and whatnot. Do all the YouTube-y bollocks. You understand? If you also want to help out and want to check out some of the crazy merchandise that I have on Gaming Treasure Chest, you can check out the Etsy yet again by looking down below. There's different dice holders and things that are to do with D&D, so if you like any of that, potentially consider purchasing. But as I said, do not feel forced. These are your options. I just want you to know the kind of crazy stuff that I do. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you have a great day, whatever the hell's going on. And until next time, goodbye!